I considered talking about these two women individually, but I think so much of House of the Dragon is based on the conflict between the two of these women, of their different worldviews, their different personalities, the different ways they go about things, their backgrounds, their plans, and that they're such perfect. I don't even want to say foils for each other because I think they're more or less exact opposites of one another. I think you have to talk about them both at the same time. So that being said, let's get into it with Alicent. So Alicent is the daughter of Sir Otto Hightower, who is the younger brother of the current Lord of Old Town. Now, the Hightowers, I would argue, are probably the single most powerful, wealthy, and prestigious family in the Seven Kingdoms. While technically speaking, you have the Tyrells, who are their liege lords, and then you have the Targaryens, who are their liege lords. In terms of the actual domain that's directly controlled by the house, the Hightowers are probably the wealthiest. They own a very large, wealthy city. They control the citadel where all the maesters come from. During this period in history, they control, or at least have immense influence over the faith, as the High Septon is still based out of Old Town. It doesn't move to King's Landing, I believe, until Baelor the Blessed. Now, it's kind of an interesting position because her father, while being a legitimate male from probably the most prestigious family in the Seven Kingdoms, other than the Targaryens at this point in history, he can't really expect to inherit much. Maybe his brother will throw him some lands if he has some available. He'll definitely get a very generous pension, maybe a position in the administration. He's still a high tower of Old Town. It's not like he's going to be wanting for anything. But if he wants to make any kind of dynasty, any sort of permanent wealth, he does have to do it himself. His name and wealth and pension and whatever can only take him so far. And he manages to more or less achieve that position by becoming Hand of the King. But once again, he doesn't have his own power base. He's directly in the service of some greater lord who can dismiss him at any given time, and then he'll be left with nothing and he'll have to go back to Old Town with his tail between his legs. So I do think it is true that Otto Hightower is very much a social climber and realizes that this is his one shot, this is one opportunity, and he's got to seize power at all costs and maintain some kind of long term plan. So he has his children, Alicent, and I forget what her older brother's name is. And by all accounts, he seems to have done a very good job raising Alicent, especially since her mother died. I think the core of Alicent's character is she's very much someone who tries to do what's expected of her, morally, socially, and religiously. Duty just seems to be a very natural part of who she is, and it's something that she takes to very naturally. Um, in the flashbacks where we see her as a kid, she seems to be very well behaved, well mannered, very devout, polite, always ready to be helpful or to comfort those in need. Now, Rhaenyra, on the other hand, was an only child as her brother died in as part of was a stillborn, and as far as we can determine, she grew up completely spoiled rotten. She greatly reminded her father of his wife, and there's like some weird Electra complex going on there, where I think Viserys felt that if he spoiled his daughter enough, who looked like her mother, that he'd somehow get her mother back, or he'd make amends, or he had some kind of like weird sexual thing for his daughter going on. But regardless, Viserys spoiled her completely rotten, let her get whatever she wanted, shielded her from the consequences of any and all of her actions. And as a result, she grew up to be an exceedingly willful, selfish, and overall unlikable person. I think a really good scene in the show is when the various lords are trying to propose marriage to her, and she just humiliates one after another of them. And that's just kind of an example of how entitled she is and how I guess imprudent she is, because even if some of the proposals are lame and some of the people are not really what you would want in a husband, either in terms of their power or their personal characteristics. These are still the ruling lords of your realm. Men do not easily forget humiliation, and there's really nothing to be gained by humiliating people, especially very powerful lords, and just running them through the mud like that. You're going to create a lot of enemies later for really no gain. But because Rhaenyra is Rhaenyra, she just doesn't care about that. She just assumes that everything is going to somehow work out. To be somewhat fair to Viserys, the choices he has as an heir at the moment are, I guess he could have made his sister heir, although that would have meant that the throne would have passed out of the hands of the Targaryens and you would have had a Valerian on the throne, unless one of her children were to take the Targaryen name, I guess. The only other alternative would be Daemon, the rogue prince, who's a complete and total psychopath. So, I mean, it's not like you really had too many options at that point in time. So, I guess it kind of makes sense that he picked Rhaenyra. However, the fact that he would maintain that she was his heir and never really considered any other possibility would cause the realm to bleed. I think it also really puffed up Rhaenyra's ego because she, this like super Chad badass guy, got passed over and she's the heir now. She's in control. No one's going to replace her. I think her willful behavior is demonstrated well when she. I think she try. It's her. I think she's a virgin at that point in time. She tries to lose her virginity to her uncle, who is it cock blocked if it's a female. I don't know how it works, but he basically just screws with her and leaves her unsatisfied. Enter into Kristen Cole, and perhaps the only good decision Rhaenyra ever made. She decided to appoint Kristen Cole to the Kingsguard as opposed to just picking someone on the basis of the family name in which they can forge a strong alliance. Generally speaking, I think that's a good idea. I maintain that the only good decision that Cersei ever made was appointing Balon Swan to the Kingsguard. Um, I think it's generally speaking better to have the guy who's got your back to be someone who you can 100% rely on to have your back and to die for you, and someone who's a competent fighter rather than a political appointment. I think Aegon the Sixth also does a good job of this when he makes Raleigh Duck his one of his Kingsguard, and John Connington's like, you shouldn't be doing that, and he's like, Raleigh will die for me, and that's the most important aspect of a Kingsguard. So she brings Kristen Cole on board, knowing that he's 100% because he's from a minor house, that he's 100% dependent on her. And this comes to her sexual relationship with Kristen Cole. Now, at the expense of being cringy, I think you could very strongly argue that she took advantage of him and that their sexual relationship was not entirely consensual. And maybe to kind of give a better example of this, if you've seen Berserk, Griffith has sex with Charlotte. Now, you can debate as to whether or not it's rape. I would tend towards thinking it is, because he goes to Charlotte, and Charlotte tells him, no, we're not married, it's wrong. And then he kind of forces himself on her, but she kind of accepts it. So, like, despite the fact that she clearly was in love with Griffith, and she did enjoy having sex with him, there was a lot of coercion involved, and it's arguably not entirely consensual. I think that's also the case with her and Kristen Cole, where he's by and large an honorable man who wanted to stick to his vows. Is he attracted to Rhaenyra and had feelings for her? Yes, but she very heavily kind of pushes him into it, and he's not really in any kind of position to resist her. I mean, he's her sworn sword bound to absolute obedience. What is he going to do? I mean, if he refuses, Rhaenyra could always just tell the king that he tried to rape her and have him, like, gelded or something else horrendous happen to him. This is Rhaenyra we're talking about, so it's certainly not beyond her. In the case of Alicent, though, I don't think there's really any accusations, even within. It's been a while since I've read Fire and Blood, but I don't think anyone made any allegations that she had any sexual affairs, other than obviously with her husband. She was probably a virgin when she got married, and there's no evidence that I can see that she cheated on Viserys. I don't even really see that there's any evidence that she had an affair with Kristen Cole. It's because to her duty is very important both to the gods and to her family, and it's her job as a noble lady to marry a king, to be a virgin at her wedding, and to bear him legitimate children. Whereas with Rhaenyra, if that doesn't suit her needs, then she can just do whatever she wants. Because, like I said, her father spoiled her rotten. I can't see Alicent ever doing something like what Rhaenyra did with Kristen Cole. I also can't see her trying to fuck her uncle either. I mean, granted, she's a Targaryen and they're just a bunch of degenerates in general who engage in rampant incest. But even then, just could you really see Alicent going into like King's Landing with like some shady brothel and trying to have sex with a psychopathic mass murderer? I just really can't see that happening. I think the fact that Rhaenyra is attracted not just to the bad boy, but to like a complete psychopath who kills people for fun, I think also says something about her character. And as we're kind of growing up between the two of them, I think it's time to talk about Alicent's relationship with Viserys. So a lot of people I see will say that she's a snake, that she was a social climber, that she manipulated Viserys in a moment of weakness. I don't actually really see any evidence for that. I think what her father, and I do think they say this in the show, felt was Alicent is very pretty, she's very sweet and kind and compassionate, and always ready to help people. So all he really had to do is just send her to King Viserys in his depression and in his grief, and things would just kind of naturally work their way out. I really don't think there was necessarily a hidden agenda on Ellison's part. I think she just saw someone who was grieving, who had gone through a similar experience she had in losing her mother, and she just legitimately cared about Viserys. Maybe not necessarily romantically. She probably saw him more as like an uncle or something like that. But I don't think there was really necessarily anything duplicitous about it. I don't think there's really any evidence on screen. It also just doesn't really seem like something she would do as part of her character. Like I said, did her father hope for that to happen and kind of manipulate that into happening? 100% yes. He probably is also the one who suggested that Viserys should marry her. Even though Viserys was probably older than her father, and I think at that point it started to develop leprosy, she decided that she was going to do her duty and marry him. That her children would, at this point in time, Rhaenyra was still the heir, but if she had a son, her son might be the heir, and she would achieve the success that her father wanted. Likewise, just as a side note, I think her affection for Rhaenyra was sincere. I think she did see her as her friend, as someone who had suffered a similar fate as her, and just wanted to try to help her out. We have that good scene where they both go to the Sept. I think it's interesting. It's an interesting kind of contrast between the two of them. That Alicent is very devout to the Seven, and it doesn't really seem like any of the Targaryens are at this point in time. I think somebody said part of it is to show that the Targaryens, it might have been the director, aren't really assimilated at this point in time, and any kind of aspects of Westerosi culture they've adopted are just exceedingly superficial. So Alicent decides winds up marrying Viserys without complaint, like I said, to try to help her father get the position he wanted and to ensure a better future for her children. Even though Viserys is old, has leprosy, and there's that really disturbing scene where he's having sex with her, and he doesn't like make any attempt to like bring her pleasure or make love to her or be nice or anything. He just basically treats her as his like sex toy. It's really kind of disturbing and gross, but she puts up with it because it's what's expected of a woman to do. And because once again her religious convictions prevent her from having an affair, or anything like that. She at least loves her children, if nothing else. A lot of people compare her to Cersei. If Alicent was like Cersei, then the Dance of the Dragons never would have happened. She would have been like killed Rhaenyra, or otherwise dealt with her a lot earlier. So when it comes for Rhaenyra to get married, on the other hand, she decides to go with Leonor Valerian, the son of Corlys the Coper. So Corlys the Coper is the wealthiest man in the Seven Kingdoms because he traveled to their equivalent of China and Japan and just made a ton of money. They're the wealthiest house in the Seven Kingdoms by accumulation. The Hightowers are probably wealthier in terms of the actual assets they own. But she decides to marry him because he's gay, and because he's gay, um, she'll let him fuck as many dudes on the side as he wants. If in return if he lets her fuck anybody that she wants. Um, and she winds up starting to just have sex with Harwin Strong, and all of her children are very obviously the children of Harwin Strong. Everybody knows it. The series is completely deluded about it. It's a bit like when Cersei tells Tywin, Joffrey is Jamie and my son, and he's just in complete denial, and he's like, "No, it's not true. It's not the case. It just happens that despite the kids having neither parent having dark hair, the kids somehow have dark hair and look like Harwin Strong, and everybody knows that her husband's gay, and stuff like that." So she knowingly just cucks her husband, isn't really discreet about it. No one really cares. If anyone like brings it up, she tries to kill them or just yells at them. Her husband winds up killing Corlys the Coper's brother because his brother called her out on her bullshit. Meanwhile, when you look at her relationship with Kristen, I think he just basically says, "I'm not going to be your whore. I'm not going to be like your side dude who you're fucking instead of your husband. I'm not going to be the dude who is like the illegitimate father of your children." So I guess you could say Harwin Strong was kind of the rebound, where she just found like the next guy she could and had him fuck her. I think also, so Kristen Cole and Ellison's relationship is interesting. I think that they have a very pure and wholesome form of courtly love. So courtly love is when there's kind of this subtle romantic interest between two people, but they make no attempt to act on it. And there's a certain degree of affection for each other, but it's meant to be kind of at a distance. And I think both Elised and Cole have a very close relationship because both of them have very traumatic sexual pasts where basically they were just treated as a sex toy by their significant other. And I don't think either of them is really in the mood to do anything. And both of them are just kind of driven by duty and wouldn't do that sort of thing anyways. So this is kind of the situation we find ourselves in. Damon kills his first wife and no one really cares. His second wife dies under mysterious I get that she dies giving birth, but I think it was the dragon who kills her. But anyway, she dies too, and no one cares about that. And then Rhaenyra's like, "You're the badass. It was so cool when you killed your wife. It was so cool when you just grabbed random people off the street and beheaded them. I want you to stick your dick in me, um, Damon. Sorry, Aemond. No, Damon. Oh, these Targaryen names are all the same. I get them mixed up just because like they add or remove a D or an A somewhere. So she's like, "What I'm gonna do is with my husband, my uncle, I'm gonna kill my husband after cucking him, and then marry my uncle instead." So she kills her husband after cucking him and marries Prince Daemon. So, and her father, of course, lets her get away with it because her father will let her get away with murder. he went to all that trouble to try to get Damon out of the line of succession, to keep sending him away, but he's like, my little girl wants to marry him, and yeah, he's a psychopath, and yeah, if when he becomes her prince consort, it's pretty likely that he's probably going to kill her and then seize the kingdom for himself, or make himself regent for life, or some other shady thing's going to happen. But Rhaenyra can have, if she wants to have sex with her uncle, that's okay with me, because whatever Rhaenyra wants, I want. So, like I said, Damon and her kill her husband. This is why I call him Corley's the Coper, because he's like okay with the fact, like it's pretty obvious that they killed his son. He's like, nothing I can do about it. And then it's like, well, but the kids aren't your grandkids. Your line is going to be dead. And then he's like, well, blood doesn't matter. It's just the family name that matters. And then Damon kills her brother in public, his brother in public, and he doesn't really care about that either. Like I said, dude, he like somewhere when he was coming back from a shy, he just got shipwrecked in Copesville, Sithorios, and he was just never able to get out of there. But once again, Alicent just continues to loyally be a wife to Viserys. I think once again she was the only person who was really there for him. Like Rhaenyra wasn't there for him when his wife died. She like fucked off and just ignored him. Alicent was there for him. Alicent took care of him during his long period of invalidism. Um, Rhaenyra tries to pull this back against her later on. It's like, you're keeping him drugged so you can rule the seven kingdoms in his place. Rhaenyra does a lot of really like low tier gaslighting throughout the show to Alicent. It's really kind of cringy and pathetic. I think it partially comes from the fact that Rhaenyra is such a nasty person. She can't really understand that someone else might bind themselves with concepts of duty or loyalty. My understanding is she doesn't really believe in the seven or really have a religious standing. So the idea that anyone would be bound by these things, I think, is just very foreign to her. And she assumes it comes from some sort of malicious desire to control people on Alicent's side. But yeah, she's just all fucking her husband, her uncle, and cucking her first husband, whereas Alicent is spending all her time taking care of Viserys as he slowly dies of leprosy. And then there's their children. So you could argue that Alicent did a bad job with Aegon the Second. To be fair, though, Aegon the Second was completely ignored by his father. His father was old enough to be his grandfather. He seems to have taken no part in raising him. He seems to have told him frequently, like, you're just not important. He seems to have basically no affection whatsoever for his children with Alicent. Like I said, he just kind of views her as his sex toy, something that he can fuck whenever he feels lonely or sad, and there's not really any genuine affection there. I think a lot of people try to make Viserys out to be a nice guy. I don't know. I think he's a very pathetic, weak man. But yeah, Aegon the Second grows up to be a complete and total fuckwad. I think it's interesting. My understanding is I don't know if he's actually a rapist in the book. I feel like that was put in the show. I think that Mushroom accuses him or something, or someone who is hostile to. No, I don't think it was Mushroom. I think it was the person who was like Alicent's supporter, and he wanted to blame everything on Aegon the Second. But I don't know if there was really a credible accusation that he was a rapist. I think that was just put in the show to make him less sympathetic and to make the Greens look worse. So I think they realized that like no one was taking Rhaenyra's side, so they had to Me Too Aegon. Now is Aegon a complete and total degenerate? Yes. Has he been involved in all kinds of like shady shit? Yeah. But I think he was raised with the expectation that there was no expectation, that he was just there. I think his mother probably did the best job she could have. I think she dealt with him raping that girl the best she probably could have. she at least gave the woman a bunch of money, and I think she sent her away. I mean, what could she do? Like if the prince is like raping servant girls, that's bad. You can't really punish him. She can't really publicly expose them. I think she just like beat the crap out of him and yelled at him and tried to pay the woman off. So at least she got something for her trouble. Which once again, if I'm sure it's like modern ears that this would be like enabling toxic masculinity or something. But given the kind of stuff that Rhaenyra covered up that Daemon did, I really don't think it's that big a deal. To be honest, in comparison, if that even happened, which I feel like was just inserted in the show to make Aegon the Second look even worse. Rhaenyra's children are a bunch of Hellions, and this kind of brings us to me what I think is what ultimately starts off the Dance of the Dragons is when Rhaenyra's kids savagely attack Aemond and put out his eye. Like that was pretty messed up. They just attacked him. They tear his eye out. Um, he's crippled for well, he's like completely scarred for the rest of his life. He doesn't have binocular vision anymore. I mean, he did get Rhaegar out of it, so that was good. And then like Alicent's really pissed off because she's a mother and her son just had his eye ripped out by a bunch of little hellions. And Viserys just doesn't give a shit. He's like, yeah, I guess that they ripped out my son's eye, but it was Rhaenyra's kids, and Rhaenyra can do whatever she wants, and you have to be. If anything, he actually doesn't even care about that. He gets angry that someone questioned the paternity of her kids. It was kind of funny when he asks Aegon the Second, and Aegon the Second's like has the opportunity to throw his mother under the bus, but he doesn't. And he's like, everybody knows they're bastards. It's just look at them. It's super, super obvious. And Viserys is like, you can't say that about my blessed, my dearest Rhaenyra. She would never cuck her husband. I don't want to ever hear this ever again. And so, like I said, he just doesn't give a shit. And then we have like this scene where, so Ellison kind of freaks out a bit during this scene and wants to have one of Rhaenyra's kids' eyes put out. Honestly, I don't know what Viserys should have done in this situation. My friends think that people I've talked to have said that he should have removed the kid who took out his eye from the line of succession, because you can't just like blind the son of the king and have no repercussions for it whatsoever. And then we get the really like low tier attempt at gaslighting where she's like, "Oh, you spent all your life being this prissy little princess because you want people to respect you, but you're actually just as bad as I am." And it's just really really cringy. And so, like I said, things just kind of continue on. Viserys gets more and more decrepit. Rhaenyra just gets more and more degenerate with her husband, and we kind of come to the Dance of the Dragons. And I think by this point in time, I think Alicent just has kind of seen the writing on the wall, and she's like, okay, Rhaenyra killed her husband after cucking him. She's married to a psychopath. What do we think is going to happen after Viserys dies? Is it going to be A, she's just going to let Aegon the Second and Aemond and Helena just live on their own? She's not going to view Aemond having Rhaegar as a threat to her position. She's not going to view the king's legitimate male heir a threat. And even if Rhaenyra was okay with it, Daemon isn't going to kill them. Or what's more likely that Daemon and or Rhaenyra is going to immediately kill the kids as soon as the king's body is cold. I think that's probably the most likely outcome. So I think she was just like, screw it, I'm gonna have to make a play here. If I want to survive, if I want my kids to survive, I'm gonna have to take Rhaenyra down before she takes me down. Now, from how the show presents it to us, she does hear Viserys' last words, and it does to most people sound like he is changing his mind and he's declaring Aegon his heir. Regardless, I think whether you think Rhaenyra had a better claim or not, which I don't think she did, but I think Alicent at this point really doesn't have any other option. Like I said, Rhaenyra has killed her husband, and she's married to a psychopath. So I don't really know what else Alicent's supposed to do at this point in time, other than declare Aegon the second king. I think she legitimately, if she could have, would have offered Rhaenyra some sort of deal and abided by it. But I just don't think you can trust Rhaenyra. How can you trust someone who cocks their husband and then passes off the bastards as the legitimate heirs to the Iron Throne? You just can't. So I think at the end of the day, I'm on Team Alicent. I'm a big Alicent fan. It doesn't hurt that she's played by Olivia Cook, who's a very attractive woman. But she just seems like a legitimately sweet girl who always tries to do her duty. Is there some cunning there? Yes. Is there some ambition there? Yes. But I think honestly, she's just mostly what she appears to be. Whereas Rhaenyra is, yeah. I think what maybe should have happened, and a friend of mine pointed this out, is Ellison should have just fled back to Old Town and just waited for Rhaenyra to screw things up. Because Rhaenyra would have just insulted all the great lords. She would have threatened them with her dragon. She probably would have. She would have let Daemon just fly around and just do gang rapes and stuff like that. It probably would have resolved itself in within a couple of years. I mean, it's not like Rhaenyra can just attack Old Town. That would be catastrophic. That would cause a big coalition against her. Um, so that's probably what she should have done. I think she said the writing's on the wall. We're gonna just have to. We're just gonna have to deal with this. So that's my attempt to compare the two. Sorry if this was a little long and a little rambling. There's a lot of ground to cover. But no, I really enjoyed House of the Dragon season one. It's somewhere between where Game of Thrones was really good and where it was starting to get bad.